You two clearly know each other. And I never allowed anyone to come to this area. So, I don't know if you told him to come here in advance or something. That's clearly a problem on your part." The guard didn't back down. Collins was left speechless for a moment before he retorted again. "How can that be my problem? Even if a person heard my plan, you were supposed to make sure that nobody was here. What were you clearing if you couldn't even make sure that someone that was hiding here was taken care of? What's more, it wasn't just one person, there were two FC King people here." The guard was also given his turn to be speechless. All the same, the two were not willing to give up on blaming each other. Seeing this scene, the guy with glasses on was stunned. He looked at the guard that was supposed to be in charge of this area and shouted angrily, "What the hell are you doing here? Are you a guard or a hooligan? You are cooperating in making sure that our customers are harassed?" The guard looked at him and retorted, "How can you say that I'm a hooligan? I was clearly serving one of our customers. In the end, he gave me a tip of $50,000 for my good work." None of them could believe how shameless this guy could actually be. He could change the crime to a responsibility. What's more stunning was his ability to shift the blame to others. Serving customers your head? Does someone like him deserve to be called a customer here? That's your accomplice in crime? Glasses shouted. His breathing had already gotten irregular due to the anger. He couldn't believe that he had actually had such a subordinate all along. If he's a hooligan, then the other 7 or 8 are not. After all, I was serving almost 10 customers. If I dared to go against the customer's wishes, were you going not to punish me? You would obviously care nonetheless and say that the customers have to be given the priority, the guard continued. Glasses. Priority in harassing other customers? You are clearly out of your mind? Guard. There were more customers on one side. I favored the side that profits the resort the most. Losing a single customer to retain 10 is a good deal. Glasses. You want to retain the 10 customers and chase away hundreds by ruining the reputation of the resort? Looking at the two sides that were arguing non-stop, Jack got impatient. Since they were busy, he too decided to get busy. He took his phone and sent a text to Denali. "Take care of the footage," and immediately after he sent the text, he deleted it from the sent messages. He had asked Denali to take care of the footage. Collins and his goons had completely forgotten that there were actually cameras here. It was just that nobody was observing them at this time. Nobody had expected that there would be an incident in this part of the resort. Furthermore, the playground was already closed. So, there was no way that there was supposed to be a person here. When he was done, he looked at Collins, who seemed to be in a daze as he looked at the two who were still arguing. Jack squatted next to him before he snapped his fingers in front of his face. The snap of the fingers immediately brought Collins to the reality. It was also at this moment that he remembered that he was in pain and began rolling on the floor. Seeing this, Jack decided that he had to get this done as fast as he could. He still has to deal with the issue with Brenda before looking into the matter concerning his mother through his second uncle. Clap, clap. Jack's clapping attracted the attention of the two and the other guards. Seeing that they were all looking at him, Jack spoke. "Look at your behavior. You're speaking too much with a partner in crime instead of detaining him and calling the police over." Huh? Glasses was confused for a moment before remembering something. He looked at the guards who were still standing there, not sure on what they were supposed to do. "Oh, I'm a senior and I have subordinates," he muttered loudly. Ignoring the strange gazes that he received, Glasses said, "Grab the 3 criminals and take them to the security department before calling the police to come over and take them away." 3 criminals? Weren't there supposed to be 2? The guards questioned themselves. Seeing the gazes that were filled with confusion looking at him, Glasses frowned again. But thinking about what he had just said added with Jack's cold gaze on him, Glasses quickly corrected himself. Ahem. I meant the 2 criminals. The guards took action quickly this time and took away Collins, who was on the ground. The other guard tried resisting, but he was no match for the almost a dozen guards. They easily beat him up with the batons and subdued him before carrying him away like a log of wood. "Can you come with us so that we can wait for the police to come and take care of them case?" Glasses looked at Jack and asked politely. "Just look at the footage first. If there's a problem with it, you can come and look for me. I still have other things to do for now. So, I'm off." Jack shook his head and left. Glasses looked blankly at the direction that Jack had left for a moment before he followed the guards back to the security department. After getting back to the room, he found that Denali was still busy with the laptop. Additionally, there were 3 girls present in the room. They were clearly waiting for him to come back. "Jack, You're back. Celine got onto her feet when she saw that Jack had returned. The others also got onto their feet to welcome him. Yeah. That guy has been taken by the security department of the resort. The police should be having a visitor tonight, Jack stated before he took a seat on one of the sofas. Wendy and Angie thanked Jack for helping Celine. Then, the girls and Jack chatted for a few minutes, asking Jack about the details of what had happened. Jack didn't hide from them and told them what had actually happened there. After that, the girls decided that they would give the police a statement on what had happened. Although it was true that Colin's family was bigger than theirs, it was also true that it couldn't compare with the three of them as long as they took action together. Since they had decided, Jack saw no reason to stop them. He was clearly not done punishing Collins. If his family was the pillar that he was relying on to bully others, Jack would as well make sure that it fell completely. After a while, Jack asked the girls to go and sleep. After all, it was already midnight. They had been busy during the day and it wasn't good that they stayed awake all this time. After they left, Jack looked at Denali and asked, "Have you taken care of the footage?" "Yes, master. I have completely edited the footage and removed the parts that show your face. I have filled the blanks with the scenes that show your back." Denali nodded and responded. Jack nodded in satisfaction. This was one of the good things that he liked about Denali. She could understand his meaning fast. Well, that was other than Celine's incident. Now, Denali focused on the previous matter, that was handling the issue concerning Brenda. Jack instructed her to find all the information about those that Marion had spoken to before. Although he would have wanted her to investigate about Marion and Brenda's communication information as well as the way that they spent their money during this year and the past one, he still remembered that Denali was also a human and she had to rest. So, after she found all the data on Marion, Jack asked her to rest and continue doing things the following day. After all, although it was true that she could stay awake through the night due to her current strength, he thought that it wasn't worth it. It was good enough to sleep late and wake up early. Other than that, there was no way that Jack was going to allow it. The following morning, the news about the playground area being sealed was spread to all those present in the resort facilities. There were still 2 other playgrounds so, the children could still play. Now that the mood for the vacation had already been ruined by the chain of incidents that had happened the previous day, Jack and the girls decided to leave. The girls told the other girls that were in the group about what had happened the previous night. After that, Celine, Wendy, Angie and Jack went to the Star Hospital to pay Jonathan a visit. Seeing them, Jonathan smiled and asked, "You guys missed me already?" Now, Jonathan only needed to rest before he would be back to the previous condition before the attack. His recovery speed was amazing that it even surprised Jack. In any case, Jonathan hadn't suffered grievous wounds. It was just that the poison in his body had reduced the speed of blood clotting. So, he ended up losing a lot of blood from the wounds and that was why he fainted. Otherwise, he would have been okay. "Who's missing you?" Jack snorted in response. As for the girls, they clearly betrayed him. "Yes, we missed you, Jonathan. Aren't we a team?" Jack couldn't help but ask himself that question. On the other hand, Jonathan gave Jack a smile when he saw his darkened face. Seeing that Jonathan was getting something to make fun of him, Jack simply turned his head to the side and snorted again. The girls giggled when they saw this scene. All the same, the group chatted for a few minutes before Jack said that they were leaving Volant City. "You can come and stay with me till you recover. After that, you can go back to doing your business, lest your enemies come charging at me, thinking that I'm you," Jack offered. Jonathan thought for a while before agreeing to the offer. If Jack could deal with Spider, then it was true that he could take care of him. What's more, with Jack present, it was more likely that his enemies would go after him, giving him, Jonathan, a break. Jonathan managed to convince the doctor to release him. As for the matter of the police, Jonathan's subordinates handled it. After they got out of the hospital, they went back to the resort before they took the Eurocopter back to Inchoate City. The group managed to arrive back in Inchoate City before noon. After they got there, Jack had Jonathan select a room in the Prince Mansion just like how Gabriel did. Denali also picked a room in the same mansion. Once everything was done, Denali and Jack continued investigating. Since they were doing things from scratch, it would take them some time. On the other hand, Jack called Ayush and Tracy, informing them that they had to use the company's connections to suppress Colin's family. As a security company, it had Cohn into contact with a lot of people. Furthermore, there were many that were willing to curry favor with Good Vision Security Limited. So, these people would be more than willing to suppress or destroy a small family for them. Jack had decided to make sure that Colin's family went down. According to the information that he had received from the girls, Jack knew that this wasn't the first time that Collins did something like this. It was said that he usually used his family's influence to completely suppress the other small families. In the end, even if he forced himself onto some girls, their families could do nothing to him as he was protected. Jack then asked why the girls were in the same group with him. In the end, the girls said that it wasn't them who had invited him. It was he who had joined them. With his family background, they didn't dare to chase him away. Furthermore, the girls had never expected that he would actually make a move on one of them. This was totally something that they hadn't calculated in their list of possibilities, considering that they thought that he would be afraid to cause a conflict between their families. Just like that, 3 days went by. The group only stayed in Inchoate City. Jonathan had finally recovered and the wounds that he had suffered had already turned into scabs. In just a week, the wounds would disappear to leave behind scars. As for the information, Jack had managed to find a lot of information about Marion and Brenda. For some strange reason, he found that there was a communication between them and his second uncle. And from the looks of it, this was the interaction that had happened on the same year that his mother passed away. Seeing this, Jack had investigated the hospital that he had taken his mother to. There, he found the information about the doctor that had attended to his mother. They looked into his account and found that he actually received a good amount of money from Marion. Linking the date that he received the money and the date that Jack had taken his mother to the hospital, there was only a difference of 1 day. He received the money a day before Jack and his mother went to the hospital. Jack immediately frowned when he received the information about this. He asked Jonathan to arrange for the doctor to be kidnapped and brought to Inchoate City. Using the group that he had, Jonathan managed to have the doctor easily captured and he was sent into the desolate warehouse where the Jerk Brothers gang had made their base. Alongside the $30 million that he had received from Jerk Brother had also offered the warehouse as a base for the 100 people that had defected to Jack's side. Since Jack had given a chance, Jerk Brother had decided to curry favor with him. At first, Jack thought that he would not use this warehouse. In the end, he never expected that he would actually kidnap a person. Jack took the Bentley Continental GT and drove towards the warehouse. He still had to do the questioning himself. Although Denali would have managed all of this, Jack thought that since this was related to his mother, he had to take care of it by himself. Not long after, they arrived at the warehouse. He found that the group that he had taken were keeping watch over the doctor to make sure that nothing happened. When they saw him arriving, they went ahead and greeted him. Jack had no intention of wasting his time with them. Instead, he asked them to bring him to where they had kept that doctor. Looking at the doctor who was sitting on the couch that he had seated on during the time that he had been kidnapped together with Celine, Jack's lips twitched. He now wondered if the gang had no other place to keep the hostages. In any case, Jack came and sat in front of the doctor. Upon seeing his arrival, the doctor began speaking. "Do you know who I am? I am a doctor. If the police know that you have kidnapped me, you will end up in jail." In response to his words, Jack smiled and asked, "Mr. Doctor, do you perhaps remember me?" The doctor, who was still wearing his white coat, looked at Jack. He tried scrutinizing him, trying to think if he had ever met him before. But no matter how hard he tried to remember, he couldn't remember anything about Jack. "Oh, looks like your memory isn't that good. Perhaps the name Alfonso family can remind you of something?" Jack asked. "Alfonso family? You are from the Alfonso family? What has the Alfonso family had to do with me? I'm not cooperating with the Alfonso family and neither have I offended you, right?" The doctor frowned as he looked at Jack. Hee, Jack chuckled before shaking his head. "Are you sure about that? About 4 years ago, did you not have a little deal with someone from the Alfonso family? More so, it was Marion. And if I'm not wrong, you got $30,000 transferred into your account." The moment that Jack talked about 4 years ago, the expression on the doctor's face shifted. It was also at this moment that he finally remembered Jack's silver hair and blue eyes. Back then, Jack was young and he wasn't like how he was now. He had his body transformed after he obtained the professional combat ability. Furthermore, it had been a few years already and Jack had already began maturing. So, the doctor failed to recognize him. Back then, he remembered that he had met Marion, one of the ladies of the Alfonso family. She had given him $30,000 so that he could tell the mother and son that there was nothing wrong with the woman's body. At that time, although he was skeptical about the situation, he still agreed. It was a woman and a young boy who had no background at all. So, he had made arrangements in the hospital and that, The moment that Jack and his mother arrived in the hospital, they were directed to him. Then, since he wasn't going to treat the lady, he didn't even waste his time testing her. He had simply taken the blood sample before disposing it off. After waiting for a period of time, he forged results and gave it to them, telling them that the hospital couldn't find anything wrong with the lady's body. He had gotten an impression of the two at that time due to their unique silver hair and blue eyes. Furthermore, they truly had good appearance. But as time went by, he forgot about them completely and had never had another deal with a person from the Alfonso family. He had thought that it was nothing big. He didn't poison the lady, he simply decided not to actually take action in treating her. She could as well go to another hospital to confirm. So, he had thought that although he had gone against his code as a doctor, he told himself that he hadn't harmed her. Now that he was reminded of the scene, and he could see that Jack actually knew about the deal, he was frightened. But, thinking that he was one of the best doctors in the biggest hospital in Crystal City, he relaxed. So you are the one? Anyway, you can't blame me for not treating your mother. You guys could have simply gone to another hospital and done the checkup. The doctor spoke nonchalantly as he leaned his back on the couch. Do you know that she actually died in the end because of your actions? Jack's expression turned cold as he said these words. She died. Anyway, it doesn't concern me. I have seen many people dying. So, the death of your mother doesn't have anything to do with me and I don't care whether she died or she's alive. The doctor yawned as he spoke. It was clear that he didn't care about Jack at all. He thought that with his status as a doctor, Jack wouldn't dare to do any harm to him. Furthermore, just from the treatment that he had received, he felt that it was just a simple interrogation. The moment that he finished speaking, he felt something big and hard smash onto his face. He was forced to fall down as even the couch that he was sitting on was flipped over due to the power that was contained in the punch. Doctor got onto his feet as he screamed in pain. He held his broken nose that was already bleeding non-stop. You don't care? You have seen many deaths, right? Perhaps you have caused even more? But one mistake that you did was to cheat and make my mother die. Jack roared in anger. That was the best hospital in the city. We were brought to you because of your arrangements. If even the best hospital couldn't find a problem with my mother, did you expect that we would actually go to the small hospitals to look around? At that time, my mother's body was already weak and she couldn't move around a lot. If you had no intention of taking care of her medication, you could have as well let another doctor handle it. Yet, you took it and you tell me that you don't care. Just wait and see how I deal with you. Jack continued speaking before he rushed towards the doctor who had just gotten to his feet and began pummeling him. Just wait and see how I deal with you. Jack continued speaking before he rushed towards the doctor who had just gotten to his feet and began pummeling him. What are you doing? I'm a doctor. The doctor was so terrified that he hurriedly shouted at Jack, hoping that Jack would stop beating him. This was completely out of his expectation. He hadn't thought that he would actually suffer a beating in Jack's hands. Before the doctor could get away, another punch landed on him. At the same time, Jack shouted, "You still FC King dared to call yourself a doctor? Do you think you deserve that title? I'm going to make sure that you pay for what you have done." As he said these words, he kept on punching and kicking the doctor. But all the same, he made sure that his punches and kicks weren't that heavy to avoid killing him. What Jack wanted for now was the doctor to suffer great physical pain. Then, he would make sure that his life as a doctor would end. The reason as to why he was so lenient was simply because he wasn't the one that had actually planned to kill his mother. But he was still involved. And the punishment for that wasn't as simple as beating him up. It had to be more than that. The cries of the doctor made those guys who were guarding the place to shiver. They couldn't imagine what was happening to that poor doctor for him to scream the way that he was at that time. Jack cared not about the cries of the doctor. He beat him up till he fainted, but still, he continued beating him up till he was woken up by the intense pain that he was feeling. In this way, for more than 30 minutes, the doctor experienced the cycle of fainting from pain only to be woken up by the intense pain. It was only after seeing that the doctor was about to break down that Jack stopped. He didn't want this guy to turn into a vegetable. Otherwise, how was he going to have mental torture next? Looking at the doctor who was no longer recognizable due to the beating, Jack nodded in satisfaction as he felt that the anger that he had accumulated in his heart for some time now had been partly vented. But it was only appeased for the time being. There was still a lot that he would have to do to make sure that the anger in his heart actually subsided. Taking his handkerchief, Jack wiped off the blood on his hands. Then, he called for the group outside to come and take the guy out. He instructed them to throw him where someone could find him. He still planned to do more than just beating him up. and for the next part of the punishment, Jack had to release him so that he could be treated. Jack then left the warehouse and went back to the palace. Making sure that nobody saw him, Jack managed to enter his room and took a shower before changing the clothes that were already stained with the doctor's blood. After that, he asked Denali to look into the dirt that the doctor had accumulated over the years that he had been working, and if it wasn't enough, she had to find ways to add more into it. He planned to make sure that the reputation that this guy had built over the years was completely trampled. In this way, he would then make sure that he was sent to prison. He had to be sentenced for a lifetime in prison. That was the reason as to why he had actually told Denali to increase the dirt on his name if possible. He didn't want to have this guy going to prison only for him to come out after a few years. He wanted him to die there. That was the least punishment that he had received. As for the one that had actually made his mother die, that person only deserved a single punishment from him: death. Crystal City, Alfonso family mansion. In a room, Brenda looked at her mother. Her mother had blonde hair that matched hers and brown eyes. She had a good figure showing that she was trying to maintain even though she was already so old and had 3 children. Mother, the doctor just got kidnapped today. I have tried using all the connections that we have in the family to look for him, but there are no traces of him. It's like he just disappeared. Brenda couldn't sit still at all. Now, she was anxious. She could still remember the time that Jack had told her that he would actually find out by himself. She had thought that it would be impossible. But all the same, she had decided to take action and hide all the evidence that could be hidden. She was just about to meet the doctor today when she suddenly got the news that he had disappeared. She had mobilized a lot of the family's resources and connections to try and find him, but in the end, she couldn't even find a single trace of him. This was Crystal City, where the real power of the Alfonso family was. But surprisingly, they couldn't find a single thing about him. That implied that the one that had taken him away was someone who had planned things well. She just couldn't imagine that Jack could actually capture the doctor that easily. Furthermore, for him to actually know that the doctor was involved, it meant that he had gotten a clue that his mother's death was related to him. Now, she wondered if she shouldn't have actually tried to send someone after him. After all, Jack only came looking for her after the assassination attempt failed. And from then, the doctor disappeared. Have you used all the available resources to find him? There's nowhere in Crystal City that he can hide. Marion frowned as she asked Brenda. I have done everything possible. There's nothing that I have spared. All the favors that I was owed during the past few years, I have actually used them to try and find the information about him. In the end, there's nothing that can be found, Brenda said. Marion failed to believe that they actually couldn't find any information about someone who was popular in the city. She took out her phone and made a call. Yes, can you find information about someone? She said to the other person on the other side of the phone. She went ahead to tell that person all the information that she had on the doctor. After an hour, the person called. I'm sorry, but the person that you are looking for cannot be found. Whether it's in the CCTV footages of the city or being seen by others. In other words, the person disappeared early this morning. The strange thing is that not even his family know where he went. And he hasn't been seen leaving the city either. After that, the other party ended the call. Marion was left standing in place, not sure on what to do. She couldn't believe that even the best information broker in the city couldn't find him. This is a little strange. Could it be related to Jack really? As long as I can remember, Jack wasn't someone with any strength or support. Marion muttered. Mom, what are we supposed to do now? If this is Jack who has actually gotten his hands on the doctor, it means that he will know that we are actually involved in his mother's death. What do we do? Brenda asked. This was actually the first time that she was this anxious about something. She was already used to being able to do anything and finding what she wanted. For her to suddenly be rendered powerless, this feeling was so strange to her and she definitely couldn't accept it. What nonsense are you spouting? You were so young back then. You only listened from the sides, so, this matter doesn't really concern you at all. You shouldn't worry about it. I will handle the situation in my own way. I won't believe that a small kid can beat me. Marion looked at Brenda as she spoke. But Mom, Brenda wanted to refute, but she was cut off by her mother's stern gaze. Go and relax. Leave this matter to me, Marion said. Although she wanted to say more, Brenda was forced to shut up because this was one of the rare times that she had seen her mother this serious. And every time that she was this way, she would always make final decisions that no matter what she did or said couldn't be changed. Seeing her daughter leaving, Marion took a deep breath as she tried to think of what she was supposed to do next. In the end, she decided to sleep and let her mind rest. Only then could she begin thinking. She slept for about 3 hours. And later on, when she woke up, she began thinking again. Finally, she got an idea and decided to call Brenda to ask her. In the end, no matter how she called, she found that Brenda's phone was switched off. She decided to go and get her by herself. But before she could take a few steps towards the door, she received a text message from a stranger. Come and get her at the forest 2 miles from the Alfonso family. Make sure to come alone or she's dead. Marian's heart skipped a beat. She tried calling the other number but she found that the number had already placed her on the blacklist and she couldn't contact the other party at all. Knowing the seriousness of the matter, Marian rushed out of the mansion. She ignored the strange gazes that she was receiving and got into her car before driving away at a high speed. Brenda was her last born and there was no way that she was going to allow someone to hurt her. She had always doted on the girl because the girl had the same character as herself. So, she loved her the most of all her 3 children. Not long after, she arrived at the forest that she had been told to come to. She had rushed on the road and ignored the traffic lights. Luckily, there was no traffic police that pursued her. Just as she was wondering on where to go, she received another text from the very same number. Just head towards the center of the forest. Brenda Pav. After leaving my mother's room, I left the family mansion. Although my mother had stated that I had to leave the matter to her, there was no way that I was going to do that. I could tell that all of this was started by me. It was just like a butterfly effect. From the moment that I had decided to have my half-brother Jack killed so that I could hide my mother's involvement in the death of his mother, he must have been taking action in the dark. Of course it wasn't that I was sure about it before. Back then, I had simply thought that his words were a joke and that there was no way that he could find out that we wanted to kill him because we didn't want to have him knowing that we were involved in his mother's death. It wasn't something simple once Jack knew about the cause of his mother's death. My father actually didn't know the reason of her death. And although he usually ignored her, he had always felt guilty about not marrying her. So, he had made sure to warn my mother and my other stepmother that they were not supposed to plan anything that would lead to her death. Although they were allowed to mess with her for simple things, anything that was related to her life was prohibited. My mother agreed to it, but we had no choice back then but to make sure that she died. In the first place, my mother never liked her and that hatred for her was transferred to me. So, when my mother had the plan to kill her, I was involved. Although I wasn't involved in the issue concerning the process of how she was going to be killed, I was the one that made sure that my father never found that she was suffering at that time. That's right, we were sure that if my father found out that we were planning to kill her, we would have to face his anger. In the end, I managed to cut off all the means that Jack's mother had tried using to get my father's attention. Even Jack was stopped by me from reaching father by lying that he was busy or that he had left the mansion. And so, Jack's mother died 2 months later. I'm not even sure what mother did because no matter how someone looked at Jack's mother, they would find that she had simply died of a natural death. Even when father tried investigating the cause of her death, he found that it was natural. And so, he didn't blame anyone and at the end of it, he had ended up completely forgetting about her. As I walked out of the family mansion, I was trying to think of a way that would help mother. Since I was the real cause of the chain reaction and Jack's suspicion, I had to find a way to solve it. It would be good if I could actually kill him off. With him no longer being in Crystal City and the world, I was sure that it wouldn't be a problem to finish him off without leaving behind clues. The reason as to why he found me the last time was simply because the assassin that mother had called over was so weak in that he couldn't even kill Jack. I got into my car and drove towards the outskirts of the city. I planned to leave the city and head to Volant City. If I could meet with Jack and kill him, then I wouldn't have the trouble of thinking about how to prevent my father from finding out about Jack's mother's death. I had already gotten far from the city when suddenly, a Range Rover blocked my path. This place was quite desolate and there were fewer cars. The reason for this was because this road was longer and there was another one that was short that led to Volant City. I had decided to use this road because I knew that my mind was a mess and I wasn't going to drive well on a busy road. I was forced to press the emergency brakes to avoid colliding with the Range Rover. After that, I got out of the car and looked at the car that was in front of me and shouted in anger. "What are you doing? Do you know that this is a road? You're going to cause an accident here?" Just as I finished speaking, I saw the headlights of the car being lit. And what followed that was that the Range Rover rushed towards me. I was so scared. The way that the Range Rover was coming my way, I knew that it wouldn't stop. Perhaps the driver had been angered by my words, but that's not a good reason for the driver to try killing me, right? With my thoughts still chaotic, I still managed to jump to the side and barely managed to evade being hit by the car. I looked at the car that had suddenly stopped. I was just about to get onto my feet when suddenly, the doors of the Range Rover opened and 3 bulky men got out of it. Their body statures were terrifying. Although they were wearing suits, it didn't remove the hooligan vibe that was being emitted by their bodies at all. I was already scared. Now that I could see these bulky men approaching me, the fear in my heart intensified. What are you trying to do? I tried to question them. The courage that I had when I faced Jack's cold eyes back then had already disappeared. There. At least I knew that we were in a resort and there was no way that Jack would actually try attacking me. But here, we were so far from other people. If these guys actually had the intention of killing me, I won't be saved unless another person decided to use this road. Gathering all the strength in my body, I got up from the ground and ignored the pain that came from the bruises that I had received from jumping and tried running away. Had I been closer to my car, I would have gone into it. But there were the bulky guys between me and my cars. So, the only thing I could do was to run towards the forest at the side of the road. But the 3 men ran after me. And the dress that I was wearing didn't support me running. So, they easily caught up to me. Leave me alone. Help. I tried using all the strength in my body to break free from their grasps, but I couldn't. It was also at this point that I suddenly got hit and everything went black. I'm not sure how long passed when I was unconscious, but I was woken up by the cold water that was poured onto my body. The water made me jump onto my feet. I looked around with fear in my eyes. Then, I saw that I was actually inside something like a building. The walls were made of wood. As I looked around, my gaze finally landed on someone who was seated on a chair looking at me amusedly. "Yeah, Jack? What are you trying to do?" I asked as I looked at him. Behind him, there were the 3 people that had knocked me out and brought me here. Haha. There it goes again. You also think that I'm Jack? You should be the one that sent that guy called Viper after Jack, right? The young man asked. His words confused me. Why was he talking from a different perspective? And why was he asking about something that he already knows about? Still, just to make sure, I spoke again. "Jack, stop messing around and let me go." In front of the 3 guys. I was extremely afraid. But in front of Jack, at least I had a little bit of courage to berate him. "Young lady, you are mistaking me for someone else. Actually, I'm not Jack, I'm Jonathan. Jack's cousin. As for Jack, he should be here soon." The young man smiled and spoke. "Cousin? Jack has a cousin?" I asked doubtfully. How is this possible? I knew Jack all too well. How could he have a cousin? Furthermore, why would a cousin look exactly like him? This was impossible, right? "Yeah. That guy that you sent was so dumb. I told him that I wasn't Jack. In the end, he actually thought that I was lying. So, he attacked me and ended up dead. But, I have to thank you for sending that guy to kill Jack. After all, had it not been for that attack, I wouldn't have met my cousin this soon." Jonathan spoke again. I was still confused about what he is talking about. But at this time, I suddenly heard the sound of footsteps heading towards the door. I looked towards it, wondering who it was that was coming. No need to be so nervous, that should be Jack. The moment that Jonathan finished speaking, I saw a person that looked just like him coming in. The moment that I looked into his eyes, I finally believed what I was told. The coldness in his eyes was the same as the one that he had shown back then when he came to my room in the resort. "Jack? There are 2 of you?" Author's Pav. Jack had already gotten back to Crystal City. This was the first time that he had actually come back to this place since he left during the previous month. In any case, he was here to make sure that those that were involved in his mother's death were all punished. In his mind at that moment, a blood debt had to be paid by another. His mother was the most precious person in his heart and she was simply killed off. There was no way that he was going to let the murderers off the hook. He had already asked Jonathan for help again. Jonathan had accepted because this matter concerned the death of his aunt. And of course, he too was so angry about it. But, he was good at hiding things from the others. When he got into the forest that Jonathan had informed him to come to, Jack found that there was a wooden house built here. The house was located in the middle of the forest. He arrived in front of the door and he could already hear the conversation between Jonathan and Brenda. Without wasting time, he pushed the door open and entered. Just after he entered, his gaze landed on Brenda who was looking at him. "Jack? There are 2 of you?" she asked with disbelief clear in her eyes. "Jack? There are 2 of you?" she asked with disbelief clear in her eyes. Jack gave her a cold gaze before he focused on Jonathan. I have already informed her. She should be here in a few minutes. Jonathan nodded and looked at two of the guys behind him. You two can go and bring her over. Yes, boss. The two nodded before they left. Jack on the other hand looked at Brenda and spoke. You refused to tell me the reason as to why you wanted to kill me. I did my own research and found the reason. Tell me, is it just because you don't want to have someone dangerous as me? After all, after I know that you guys actually were involved in the death of my mother, it will be troublesome, right? Brenda, who was still surprised, looked at Jack again. This time, she could see that the coldness within his eyes had grown further as there was a hint of killing intent that was surrounding him as he gazed at her. And as he said these words, she knew that the cat was already out of the basket and there was nothing to hide. So, she looked at Jack fiercely and said, so what if you know, the reason as to why we killed your mother is something that you can't even understand? You think that just because you have found a cousin who can back you up you can do whatever you want? You're so naive. Hee hee, you are so funny. You actually think that Jack is depending on me? I'm currently in my weakest state and he's the one that's helping me out. After all, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have had the guts to make big moves openly. Jonathan snickered as he spoke. Brenda couldn't understand the situation at all. She had thought that Jack was depending on his cousin so that he could get the information and have her kidnapped. In the end, it was actually the opposite. So what if he's a little bit wealthy? Do you think that you can compete with the one that asked my mother to kill that B***tch? Brenda still didn't believe that there was anything that they could do. Pa! Before she could even realize it, a slap landed on her left cheek. The power of the slap was so huge that it made her cheek immediately swell as she fell onto the ground. She held her cheek as her eyes turned red. She really wanted to cry now from the pain, but she would never allow Jack to see her crying. You dare call my mother a B***tch once again and I'll make sure that you'll suffer more than just a slap, Jack said coldly before he went back and took a seat, waiting for Marion to arrive. At this point, fear had already been introduced in Brenda's heart. For the first time, she had experienced the side of Jack that she had never seen. The side that made him easily beat her without considering that she was actually older than him. Wah! What are you waiting for? If you were intent on doing something, then do it already. I'm not ready to continue sitting here doing nothing, Brenda said. Do you have a choice? No longer smiling, Jonathan asked coldly. Although he was good at hiding his emotions, there were situations that even he himself would have to show it. He was now angry that someone actually dared to call his aunt a B***tch. Considering that the two of them were twins, didn't that mean that his mother Anita was also a B***tch? Seeing that there was nothing that she could do, Brenda could only continue sitting on the floor waiting. She wasn't sure who it was that they were waiting for. But all the same, she decided to be patient, waiting and hoping that her mother would notice that she was missing. After about 10 minutes, there was a sound of footsteps from outside, and not long after, the two big guys came in following behind Marion. When Marion saw her daughter whose cheek was already swollen, she cried in surprise and anger before running forward and hugged her. Are you okay? Who is it that dared to hit you? Tell mommy, Marion began asking. Mom, what are you doing here? Brenda looked at her mother in disbelief. She wasn't expecting that her mother would be here so soon. Then, she thought about how Jack said that a lady would be here soon. Could it be that he was talking about her mother? Brenda's heart tensed. If it was true that he was talking about her mother, then it would be troublesome. Jack would definitely not do something stupid. He must be planning something. Ignoring her daughter's question, Marion finally noticed that there was actually another person in the room. In fact, there were more than two people. She turned towards them and her pupils constricted. She stared at the cousins and asked, Jack, there are two of you? Never expected that when you actually killed my aunt, right? Jonathan asked. Aunt? Anne was your aunt? Marion looked at Jonathan incredulously. She was just like Brenda, not understanding why Jack had a cousin who looked just like him. His mother and mine were twins. I was excited that I could finally meet my aunt. In the end, you actually dared to kill her. Don't you have guts, woman? Jonathan spoke coldly. Twins, anyway, it doesn't matter who you are. For daring to beat up my daughter like this, you should be ready to pay the price. The one that had made me kill your mother or aunt is someone that you can't offend. Marion spoke coldly. Could that person be the owner of that number? Jack threw over the phone that showed a mobile phone number. Looking at the familiar number, Marion felt her heart tremble. She could still remember this person. He was the one that had told her that if she didn't do as he wanted, he would destroy the Alfonso family. And to prove that, he had actually made most of the businesses that the Alfonso family depended on to be suspended. Not willing to have her family destroyed, she made a decision to kill Anne. She never liked that woman to begin with. So, when she was given the opportunity to kill her, she took it. "How did you get this number?" she asked in disbelief. "That's my second uncle. Now that's confirmed. I really want to kill that idiot. Not only has he been trying so hard to send assassins after me just so that his son can take the position of the family head, he actually dared to have his sister killed." Jonathan was so furious that he got to his feet. Hearing his words, Brenda and Marian's minds blanked out. Uncle? Sister? Did that mean that Anne was actually part of a family that was far bigger than theirs? And they had just killed her? If the members of the family knew about that, wouldn't their Alfonso family suffer a cruel fate? That guy. It seems that he planned everything in advance. Although he was the one that had her killed, he wasn't the one that did it directly. Instead, he pushed the blame on another person, Jack stated. In this way, if grandfather investigates this, he wouldn't think that he was the one that had actually killed her, Jonathan added. Since you dared to kill my mother, you should have long prepared to face the same fate, Jack stated coldly as he stared at the mother-daughter pair. He had investigated things clearly and found that it was just the mother-daughter pair that were involved with his mother's death. The reason of having these two to come here was just to confirm that his second uncle was involved before he killed them off. He had already sentenced them to death the moment that he confirmed that they were the ones that had actually killed her. There was nothing like he was going to spare them just because they had some kind of relationship. Jack's words made Marian and Brenda look at him in disbelief. "You can't kill me. I may not be your real mother, but I'm your stepmother." Marian tried finding a way out. She knew that if Jack didn't let them leave here, there was nothing that they could do. After all, there were actually 5 men here and the 2 of them were only women. "Do you think you deserve to call yourself with the same title as my mother? Had you thought of this before you killed her, it would have been better. But you already killed her and you are trying to tell me that you can be called a mother to me? You don't deserve it." As he spoke, Jack began approaching the two. Even if his hands would be stained by blood, as long as it was the blood of those that were involved in taking or threatening the life of his loved ones, he wouldn't mind at all. Seeing Jack approaching them, the 2 women were scared. Knowing again that since she was the one that had killed Anne, and Jack was angry about that, and he would definitely not let her go free, Marian decided to look for a chance for her daughter. "Jack, I'm the one that killed your mother. Brenda wasn't involved in all of this. Please, you can take my life but please let her go." Marian tried begging. "Mom." Brenda was shedding tears. She wanted to persuade her mother but Marian didn't listen to her. "Shut up already," Marian shouted. "You think that because you will say a few words I will let her go? Not only had she cooperated with you, she had only recently wanted to have me killed. So, why should I let someone who wanted to take my life go?" Jack sneered. Marian was just about to say more when Jack moved. Before she even realized it, Jack was already holding Brenda by her neck. Brenda was now hanging in the air. Her throat had been tightly grabbed, completely denying her air. Her legs were kicking in the air fiercely. Marian paled when she saw this scene. She got onto her feet and rushed towards Jack as she began hitting him so that he could release Brenda. But her efforts were all in vain. She wasn't allowed to continue as Jonathan came forward and pushed her aside. "Since it was just me that she was involved in the real killing issue, I will grant her a quick death." The moment that he finished speaking, Jack increased the strength of his grasp and completely crashed Brenda's neck. Thud! Without reservations, he dropped her body on the ground. He gazed at Marian, who was already wailing from the pain of seeing her beloved daughter being killed. She was almost going mad at this moment as she jumped up and down, trying to get past Jonathan and reach Jack. "As for you, other than death, you will have to experience the pain of having someone that is dear to you being killed. You are lucky that she died with reason, unlike you who killed my mother who had done nothing wrong," Jack said. After that, he held the already deranged Marian and broke her neck as well. Although he would have wanted to torture the 2 women, he felt that it would completely make him so cold-blooded. But there was definitely a person that wouldn't be able to escape that fate. That person was the one that had asked others to have his mother killed. Jack would definitely not mind having him tortured to the death. Now that he was done with the 2 who had been the direct killers of his mother, he felt his heart was at peace. He felt that his mother's soul could at least calm down a little. But resting in peace, that would only happen when the last person was taken care of. That was something that Jack decided that he would have to do as soon as possible. He couldn't stand the feeling in his heart, the feeling of knowing that there was someone who had killed his mother, that person was enjoying his life normally. Jonathan felt that Jack wasn't in the best mood. He went forward and placed an arm around his shoulder before patting his back, trying to comfort him. At the same time, he gestured for the three guys to take care of the bodies. The three guys took action quickly and carried the two bodies away. As for Jack, he thought that now was the time to have the Alfonso family go bankrupt. Although it was true that Dalton hadn't been involved in killing his mother, it was also true that he had failed to protect her. He had actually taken her with him. She had sacrificed a lot just for him to ignore her, and as his mother died, she must have died with a lot of regret and resentment. But, not wanting her son to have an even more difficult life, she didn't tell him about it. Now, even if his mother hadn't told him to hate them, he still did. At the end of the day, they never treated him properly. Considering that they had bullied him and his mother, that was enough for him to make them experience despair. To make them know what it felt like to be looked down upon. The Alfonso family already had a lot of enemies, but due to the strength of the Alfonso family, they dared not to show themselves in the light. But once they were given a chance, they would make the best of it. Thinking of this, Jack decided that they would take action. So, after a while, the two left the wooden house. This was the place that Jonathan was staying when he was in Crystal City. At this time, there were already several pieces of news that were trending on the internet and other social media platforms. All of this news had the same topic. Although the titles were different, they all spoke of the same thing. Less than a doctor or a murderer? Greater than less than did the doctor really take an oath? Greater than? Less than the doctor's selfish path. Greater than several headlines talked about the same thing. A doctor who no longer had the morals of a doctor. Using his position as a doctor to gain benefits. He had killed several people. Using his connections with the Alfonso family, he had actually managed to evade all those victims that had suffered under his hands. The image of the doctor who was in charge of Jack's mother in the hospital was posted there. What's more, the audio of him saying that he didn't care if a person died as he had seen many deaths occurring had been added. This piece of news immediately infuriated the netizens. None of them dared to actually take his side. Instead, there were many people who wanted to see him dead. And one after the other, victims who had suffered due to the doctor emerged one after the other. The internet boiled with comments of the angry netizens as they heard the words of those that claimed to have been sexually harassed, extorted and so on. The Alfonso family was not left behind. There was a transaction statement that showed that it was true that Marion had transferred $30,000 to the doctor. This was counted as her supporting him. Although it was true that Marion had cooperated with the doctor to have him lie about the results of the test of Jack's mother, the Alfonso family had no other relationship with the doctor. Instead, this was just one of the means that Jack had utilized to start dealing a blow to the Alfonso family. He would begin by having their reputation smeared with mud. All the same, it was also true that the Alfonso family wasn't clean. So, one by one, several cases of them evading tax, selling defective products and so on began emerging. It was a storm on the internet as one by one, the enemies that the Alfonso family had been nurturing throughout all these years began emerging one after the other. They were the ones that were adding fuel to the fire that Denali had already set up. This was what Jack had meant when he said that if it wasn't enough, she had to add more to make sure that it was. So, the issue of the doctor cooperating with the Alfonso family as well as some cases such as sexual harassment were added from nowhere. The victims were all created by Denali. So, this made the doctor's image plummet at a faster speed. Of course Denali didn't simply put this evidence stupidly. She had made enough preparations to make sure that no matter how the police looked into it, they would find that it was true. One of the methods that she used was to find those people who had really experienced sexual harassment. Then, in return for claiming that it was the doctor who had done it, Denali would help them solve the real culprit of their harassment. Added with the compensation that they received from Denali, cash of course, these people easily agreed to this. At this moment, inside a hospital in Incoat City, the doctor had just opened his eyes after losing his consciousness for several hours due to the beating that he had received from Jack. He was currently inside a private ward. He was recognized by someone who knew his identity and that was the reason as to why he was here. In this ward, there happened to be a TV. It was just that the TV was currently in the silent mode, giving no sound. Doctor just happened to open his eyes. When he turned to the side with great difficulty, he saw the news that made his eyes bulge in their sockets. Although the sound wasn't there, the headlines of the breaking news was enough to inform him of what was happening. What the heck? Since when did I start harassing people sexually? I extorted someone. How am I extorting others here? This is framing. Someone is framing me. He cried in his mind in disbelief. His mouth was sealed, so he couldn't speak. He was just shouting when suddenly, a group of 4 police officers accompanied by a doctor and a nurse came into the room. Where's the wounded doctor? One of the police officers asked as he looked around. No matter how he looked, he could only see a bed and there was nobody there. Ah, he's the one there. The nurse pointed at the bed. It was only then that the police actually noticed that the white on the bed was a person and not the bedsheets. He could finally see the little slits that revealed a pair of reddened eyes. That's a person? Another officer asked in disbelief. Yeah, he's the one. He was beaten in that his whole body had wounds of several degrees. We had no other choice but to put bandages all over his body. The doctor explained. Even the mouth? An officer asked. Yes, not only did he lose a lot of teeth, but even his lips had been burst. It just like this guy had gone somewhere to be beaten up by a gang of people. Even bees don't bite people in such a manner. The doctor continued to explain. Then, an officer in the group looked at the TV and happened to see the news. He looked at the TV before looking at the mummy on the bed. He looked at the 2 sides for a while before he got to get the remote. What are you doing? The officer in charge of the case asked his partner. I want to hear the news. The officer replied. Don't you know that this is a patient's ward? The officer asked again, not paying attention to the TV at all. If it was wrong to have the TV audio, then the hospital shouldn't have placed one here, the guy replied. Before the in charge could react, the other officer had already unmuted the audio. Less than, she died. Anyway, it doesn't concern me. I have seen many people dying. So, the death of your mother doesn't have anything to do with me and I don't care whether she died or she's alive. Greater than. It just so happened that when he unmuted, the audio that played was the record of the piece that Denali had selected from the conversation between Jack and the doctor. And that was a recorded statement from one of the victims of the doctor's cruelty. As you have all heard, he's a doctor but he doesn't care about the life or death of his patients. What's this? This is irresponsibility and inhumanity in a doctor. Tune in for more news as we are still looking for them for you. That was a reporter giving the report. There was deathly silence in the ward as the officers, the doctor and the nurse all looked at the mummy in disbelief. They could see the face and they could see the name on the screen. So, they could tell that the person being talked about was the one in there. Doctor on the other hand wanted to vomit blood. You only recorded that part? Where's the part where you beat me up? This is scam, he roared in his mind. Then, the sound of a phone ringing echoed in the room. It was Doctor's phone. One of the officers went ahead and received it before putting on loudspeaker for Doctor to hear. Less than, Doctor, we have found that all the actions that you have been taking in our hospital do not follow the code of a doctor. So, from this moment on, you are no longer an employee of our hospital. There's no need for you to resign, we fired you. Greater than immediately after that, the call ended. Silence reigned in the room for a moment. Then, there was a rapid beeping sound from the machines that were monitoring Doctor's heartbeat. The doctor looked at it. He was shocked. He hurried forward to check only for things to go silent. What happened? The officer in charge asked with concern. The patient suffered from heart attack and high blood pressure and died. The doctor said as he looked at the flat lines running on the screen. It indicated that the heart had already stopped beating. He died? Just like that? The officers couldn't believe it. What are we going to do? One of the officers asked. Well, he was found by a mob, beaten up, rescued and brought to the hospital. Then, he died from high blood pressure and heart attack due to being fired from work. The officer in charge responded. So, who killed him? The mob and the one that fired him. Who are we going to arrest? Both? Of course not. Get that person who fired him. He's the one who killed him by heart attack and high pressure. Got it. Have you recorded the statement? Yes, boss, it's all done. Okay, match on. Let's go and arrest that murderer. Yes, sir. Oh, wait a moment. Who is the one that fired him and where is he? Look at how forgetful I am. Take the phone with us, that's evidence. Handle it carefully. I got it, sir. The evidence is secured. All right. Let's go and catch that criminal. Poor hospital director, he didn't think that by trying to save the reputation of the hospital by firing Doctor actually made him a murderer who was wanted by the police. On the other hand, the Alfonso family was in a mess. They couldn't handle things in the direction that they were heading at. The damage of reputation that they had suffered from being connected with Dr. Marion, who was part of the Alfonso family, had brought them losses. Not only had several employees of theirs stopped working, there were those that had began claiming that their salaries were being delayed. Some even said that they were harassed by members of the Alfonso family who were in the upper echelons of the companies. One by one, the companies that were in charge of selling products began seeing a decrease in the number of sales. Then, the goods that were supposed to have been delivered were detained as the port authority wanted to confirm if the goods were defective or not. This in turn led to the delays in the delivery of the orders. Those that were supposed to receive the goods came after the Alfonso family, wanting to have them compensate them for the losses that they had suffered. The contracts were broken one after the other, and the Alfonso family had to pay for the damages that had been caused due to the failure in delivering the products. The banks and SACCOs that had ever given loans to the family came forward to ask them to pay the debts or they would have their property seized. The banks decided to freeze all the accounts of the members of the Alfonso family and their related businesses. In this way, they would make sure that the little money that was left in the bank wouldn't be used up before they got paid. The products that were related to the Alfonso family were boycotted one after the other. The cooperation that the family had with other partners were broken one after the other. These people were not willing to be buried alongside the Alfonso family. At this time in the Alfonso mansion, Dalton was still frowning in the study room. He was looking at the information that he had received from Kevin about Jack. The information stated that Jack had bought a building that was worth $70 million. This was something that made him question if this was true. After all, how could Jack be able to afford that huge sum of money? He was still trying to find the weakness that he could exploit to make sure that Jack came back to the family. But, he had been in here for over 2 hours, but he still couldn't think of something that could be used to get him back. Just as he was about to make a phone call, there was a sudden bang and the door was opened by force. Who the FCK has no respect that he charges into my study like a mad bull? He was already frustrated. Now that there was someone who actually dared to barge into his study like that, he couldn't help but want to vent. You unfilial son. How dare you say that I don't have respect? Am I not the one that taught you what respect is? And you dare to call me a mad bull? If I don't teach you a lesson today, then I'm not Victor Alfonso. Victor, who had just entered, received the insults from his son. Being already angry only for him to be insulted, Victor raised his cane and began beating Dalton up, completely forgetting that Dalton was now an adult. Dalton, on the other hand, had never expected that it was his father who had entered like that. This was unlike him. So, he had simply thought that he could vent on the person that was coming in. Who knew that he was actually inviting the old man to vent his anger on him? He had wanted to explain that it wasn't intentional, but Victor had already began beating him up. The cane that he was using wasn't made of plastic or wood. It was made out of metal. So, each strike that landed on Dalton made him hiss in pain, but he didn't dare to cry out loud considering that his children were around somewhere. He managed to go through the pain for over 5 minutes. Feeling tired, Victor, whose eyes were already red, looked at him and began berating him again. What did I do to deserve such a useless son? You saw that chasing your son away wasn't enough. Now, you actually dared to do something that is now threatening to destroy my family. Dalton could understand the first mistake where he chased Jack out of the family. But, what the heck with the second part? When did he even make a decision that affected the family? Could it be that the Farrell family had already announced the engagement party was going to happen tomorrow? What happened, father? What did I do wrong? Dalton asked. You dare to ask again? You don't know that your wife was cooperating with a criminal? Now, the media is condemning our family, that we are a group of criminals, Victor roared in anger. Such a thing happened? Dalton was dumbfounded. You ignorant fool. You don't even know something like that? Are you really the family head? All our businesses are collapsing. The shareholders in our companies are selling their shares at a cheap price. Goods that were supposed to be delivered have all been detained. Contracts have been broken. We need to pay back the loans that we took. All those that didn't get the goods on time are asking for the compensation for the damages that have been caused. The more he spoke, the angrier he got. In the end, Victor collapsed on the floor. He was old to begin with. For him to do such an intense activity where he spent a lot of energy, he had to get to suffer. Dalton was so dumbfounded after hearing what his father was saying. He couldn't understand how things came to this. He had thought that he was handling things well. In the end, the family was going to be ruined in his hands? Just thinking of those that had been eyeing the family business all this time and those that he had offended to make sure that he succeeded, Dalton couldn't help but shiver. He knew that those guys would come out of the dark and try to devour the Alfonso family. Seeing his father collapsing, he forgot everything that he was thinking about and rushed forward to hold him. After arranging for the old man to rest, he stormed out of the study room furiously. "Marion, where the heck has this woman gone to? Come here right now and explain to me what is going on," he roared. Those that saw him immediately took the opportunity to slip away. None of them wanted to face the angry Dalton. Even Dalton's brothers that had always wanted to be the CEO of the Fonzo Group couldn't do a thing. This would have been a good opportunity for them to take Dalton down and replace him. But now, how could they dare to take the hot potato? They would let Dalton handle the things himself. If they dared to take over the position, they would be the ones that would have to face the pressure that came with the current turbulent storm that the family was facing. After looking and asking around, Dalton was informed that Marion had left the family mansion about 6 hours ago, and since then, they didn't see her and neither did she receive any calls. What's more, they couldn't find anything about her. It was like she had just vanished. What's even more suspicious was that Brenda had also vanished. This made many people think that the mother and daughter had already run away from the very first sign of danger. Dalton was even more infuriated. How could a woman that he had married actually cause the fall of his family? He was so angry at this point. He tried thinking of the solution to the current problem. He made several calls but each and every call ended with his face darkening further and further. He was feeling helpless. It was at this point when his phone rang. Looking at the caller, he found that it was actually Alton. He was excited and a hint of hope ignited in his eyes. How could he forget that he had such powerful in-laws? He received the call immediately. "Master Alton." He couldn't even finish before Alton's angry voice came over. "You dare to lie to me? You told me that he was your son. In the end, you had actually expelled him from the family. Since you dare to play tricks on me, I will make sure that your Alfonso family falls. What's more, the engagement doesn't exist anymore." Tut. 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 The call ended there. Dalton dropped the phone onto the ground as he stared in front of him lifelessly as he muttered, "It's over." As chaos erupted in the Alfonso family, Jack was busy with something else. It had already been so long yet the body-strengthening pills had yet to be produced. He was now getting impatient. After all, this was one part of his plans. If it was missing, then the private team that he had formed would be useless with the normal strength. In other words, there would be nothing special about the private team. He wasn't ready to waste his time and resources in forming something ordinary. He got out of his room and headed downstairs. He found that Jonathan and the girls were chatting about what was happening in the Alfonso family. The girls had already known that Jack was from the Alfonso family, and now, they had also known that he was making them bankrupt. When they saw him coming down, they greeted him enthusiastically. Then, Celine asked, "Jack, are you intending to make the Alfonso family bankrupt? Or are you going to make their lives even difficult?" Celine didn't like the fact that these people had actually made Jack's childhood a living hell. Furthermore, she had just known that they were the reason as to why Jack's mother died earlier. In other words, they had killed her. So, for some reason, she found herself hating them just like how Jack did. But till this moment, she didn't know that Jack had already killed those that were responsible for his mother's death. Jack had decided not to talk about that at all. In any case, it didn't have any effect whether Celine and the others knew that he had actually killed those that were responsible or not. "Not really. I just want them to experience despair first. Then, I will acquire all the property under their names. In this way, I can make sure that they will have nothing to depend on in the future," Jack replied as he sat opposite Jonathan. Celine nodded in understanding. She could tell that Jack was intent in making sure that the Alfonso family paid for their crimes. She too would like to see that happening. During this time, Jonathan had been one of the important people in making sure that the Alfonso family went bankrupt in a single day. That's right, it was just the previous day that they had released information about the doctor before attacking the Alfonso family after the doctor had created the hype. Denali was currently busy with acquiring the shares at a low price as the shareholders sold them. These guys were so scared to continue remaining in the same company as the members of the Alfonso family. So, they wanted to hurriedly hand over the shares to others. Since it was obvious that there would only be a few people who might be willing to acquire the shares, these guys had no choice but to suffer a loss by selling the shares at a very low price. Denali on the other hand was making sure that the prices of the shares was pushed to the lowest limit while at the same time, she was fanning the flames that were already burning the Alfonso family. In this way, those that were reluctant to sell the shares at a lower price would have no choice but to sell them. Otherwise, once the company went bankrupt, let alone selling the shares, they would have to pay for all the debts that were accumulating one after the other. As the group chatted, Jack continued thinking about the pills. He already had another pill recipe, the anti-leukemia pills. These were the pills that he was going to release to the market. But he was still wondering what was taking the research center so long to produce the pills. They had the ingredients needed, they had the recipe, and all those that were participating in the production of the pills were experts in their fields. And there were 12 of them. Thinking that there might be something wrong, Jack decided to ask about it. He sent a text to Denali to ask her to inquire about the production of the pills. Knowing that Jack was getting impatient, Denali immediately contacted the person that was in charge of the production to confirm what was going on. The information that she received surprised her. She really wanted to go to the capital and look at the results by herself. But, considering that she was still busy with the issue concerning the Alfonso family, she couldn't do it. She had no choice but to inform Jack about the results. After all, he was the one that had given the recipe. The production is completed but the pills are ineffective. How's that possible? Jack asked in disbelief after he received the information from Denali. One had to know that the recipe came from the system. So, Jack was sure that there was no way that the system would give him counterfeit things. What he had received so far was a proof for that. Are you sure that they followed the steps that are required correctly? Otherwise, how can the pill be ineffective? Jack asked again. Boss, that's what they told me. They said that they had made sure to follow all the steps and they finally produced the pills 5 days ago. But, they had tried them out but they were not working at all. Denali replied. Okay then. I'll head there to see it myself. And if the equipment is what is causing problems, you can as well inform them to purchase a higher version of the equipment if it exists. There is no need for them to save money, Jack stated. After ending the call, Jack was just about to make another call when Jonathan called him out. Hey Jack, what are you talking about? Are you researching on some kind of pill or something? Not researching. The research was already completed and the recipe of the pill has already been produced. It is just that they are informing me that although they can produce the pills, it's like the pills are not working accordingly, Jack stated. What kind of pill are you researching anyway? Celine asked. It's a unique one. You can only know about it after you test one of them, Jack replied. Test? I'm not sick, so why would I want to test the pill? Celine was dumbfounded and couldn't help but ask to confirm. Of course you are sick. How can you not be sick? Jack said full of confidence. Not just Celine, but everyone in the room looked at Celine. It was as if they were trying to confirm that she was actually sick. But no matter how they looked at her, they couldn't find anything wrong with her. Humph. You? How dare you say that I'm sick? I'm going to beat you up. Celine's face was flushed as she said these words. Before Jack knew it, she was already rushing towards him, ready to beat him up. Hey, how can you be so sure that you are not sick when you haven't asked what kind of disease you are suffering from? Jack couldn't fight back at all and could only receive the weak punches from the girl. You dare to continue saying that I'm sick? How am I sick? Point out what I'm suffering from. Otherwise, I'm not going to let you go unless I beat you up and make sure that you are taken to the hospital. Celine became angry as she continued hitting Jack. When she noticed that her punches were not effective on him, she looked around and found a shoe. She was just about to continue hitting him when the door of the mansion's living room opened and Faith stepped in. Seeing Celine's actions, she couldn't help but speak. You two like flirting with each other all day long. When are you ever going to stop doing that in public? You're hurting me. You are still single. Celine blushed further when she heard Faith's words. It was only at this point that she remembered that there were actually other people in the room other than the two of them. She looked at them and found that they were actually looking at her with weird expressions. She lowered her head and rushed out of the mansion. She was so ashamed to face anyone. After all, she had just lost her composure in front of so many people. Wouldn't the image that she had created collapse? Seeing that he was spared from being beaten up, Jack decided to continue with what he was supposed to. Hello Klein. Bring the team to my mansion. We are going to Kartu City tomorrow. So, you should be here by 7 tomorrow, Jack stated. Got it boss. Klein replied. Klein was the captain that had been selected by the others of the squad. That was the decision that they had come to after a period of time. And Klein and the others were already getting uneasy all this time. After all, since the formation of the squad, they had only carried a single mission, dealing with the goons that were blocking the store entrances. Since then, they had been idle, not having anything to do. They had thought that Jack had forgotten about them. Although it was true that they had received some of the benefits that Jack had mentioned to them before, there were others that they had yet to receive. But that was not what they were worried about. What they were worried about was the squad that had been formed to be disbanded. If it was, they would lose their advantage. What's more, they too didn't like the fact that they were receiving their income yet they were doing nothing other than idling around. Now that they had been asked out again, Klein was clearly more than happy to comply. He was waiting for the time that Jack would have a use for them again. After ending the call with Klein, Jack spoke to the system. "Angel, can I have one of the helicopters delivered here? It will make things convenient for me to move around with this large group of people. It will be here in an hour at most. You know, it has to appear like there was a person delivering it. So, I will be making the arrangements for that." "That's good then." Jack nodded in agreement. "Guys, tomorrow I'm heading to Kartu. Who's going there with me?" Jack asked. "I'll be heading there with you. I have to be around you so that you can't protect me." Jonathan agreed without hesitation. "I will be going back to see my grandpa. He seems angry after what I told him yesterday," Wendy said. "Celine will also go with you. Her friend will be coming back from abroad this week. So, there's no need for her to stay here anymore. I'll handle everything here," Faith stated. "Since they are all going, I'll have to go too." Angie shrugged. She was Wendy and Celine's friend. So, if they left in Koet City, there would be no need for her to continue staying there. "Okay then. The helicopter will arrive in an hour, but we will be departing tomorrow morning. So, be prepared," Jack said. He was going to go to Kartu City with more than 20 people. It was obvious that the Eurocopter could not take them all at the same time. So, he was going to use the helicopter that he had been awarded by the system as the first income reward for the security companies. Although he previously wanted the plane to be delivered by the system once the merging was completed, the current situation stated that they had to get a bigger helicopter. Or, they could as well go to Volant City and take a plane to Kartu City. But that was something that Jack didn't want. He didn't want to go through a lot of procedures and so on just to book a plane. He wanted to leave at his own convenience. If possible, he would have used the Boeing private jet, but it was still in Venture City, a 4-hour-long trip. "What kind of helicopter can accommodate all of us?" Jonathan asked suspiciously. "You are bringing your team?" Jack asked with raised brows. "Of course I am. Otherwise, why would I leave them here? They are convenient in doing some of the small tasks you know." As he said these, Jonathan gave Jack a smile that only he could understand. Jack snorted and asked, "How many of them?" "Not many. There are only 15 of them," Jonathan stated. "What are you saying, Jonathan? 15 people in a helicopter and you are saying that the number is not big?" Wendy looked at him incredulously. She couldn't believe this guy at all. Wendy had already asked her grandfather to cancel the engagement between her and Jack the previous day. She had simply stated that the Alfonso family had cheated them and that Jack wasn't there. In other words, since Jack wasn't there, they were going to replace him with another person. This made Alton angry and that was the reason as to why he had contacted Dalton personally the previous day to inform him about canceling the engagement. On the other hand, the reason for her asking for the engagement to be broken was simply because she had realized that she had gotten the wrong person. The person that she was supposed to be engaged to was Jonathan. He was the one that had saved her. Furthermore, he was the one that she knew the most because he appeared in the area that he had saved her frequently. So, most of the times that she sneaked back to Crystal City, she would mostly see Jonathan and not Jack. The number of times that she would have seen Jack was far lower than the number of times that she had seen Jonathan. So, after some talk back in the Star Hospital when Jonathan was admitted there, she realized that he was the one that she liked her at least. Although he had yet to confirm their relationship, she was sure that he loved her, just like how she did. After all, the way that he treated her was special as compared to the way that he treated Celine and Angie. On the other hand, Jack was already a no-go zone. After all, the way that he and Celine were interacting was enough to tell her that the two of them were comfortable together. And, not wanting to cause problems for her sister, she had decided to withdraw the engagement before it was announced. "What are you talking about? 15 people is such a small number of people if we start comparing the number of people that have been hired to take care of the 2 mansions here," Jonathan refuted. "What has the mansion got to do with the number of people that you are bringing?" Wendy blinked her eyes as she asked in confusion. "It has everything to do with it. The helicopter belongs to Jack. And what's more, the mansion belongs to Jack. So, everything about the number of people that I'm bringing along has everything to do with Jack," Jonathan explained. You are not making sense at all. Wendy shook her head, clearly not understanding what Jonathan was trying to imply. On the other hand, Jack could understand. Jonathan was implying that just like the subordinates that were taking care of the mansions, his aim of having the 15 come with them was so that Jack could utilize them. He had already seen how efficient they were. So, Jack didn't think that it was a bad idea to bring them along. The helicopter can accommodate them even if you double the number, Jack stated. Ah, what kind of helicopter is that? Jonathan looked at Jack, clearly not believing his words at all. Why don't you wait for an hour and see? Jack shrugged, not willing to explain anything. Okay then. Jonathan agreed. An hour later, the sound of a helicopter could be heard coming from outside the mansion. The group that was still chatting in the living room could already tell that this was the helicopter that Jack had said that it would be here in an hour. Since they were going to leave the following day, none of them was willing to leave the living room and check the helicopter for the time being. After all, they had found an interesting topic that they were talking about. Once they left, the flow would be ruined. About 10 minutes later, Celine entered the living room. Jack, whose helicopter is that outside? She asked as soon as her eyes landed on Jack. It's mine. It's the one that we will be using to go to Kartu tomorrow, Jack stated. That big? Don't you already have a Eurocopter? What is the use of that big one now? Celine asked. Although she had just heard from Jack that they would be heading to Kartu the following day, she didn't say a word because it was natural that she would be heading there as well. Her duty here was already completed and the little that was left could easily be handled by Faith. There are more than 30 people going. So, we will need a bigger one, Jack explained. Oh, okay. Celine nodded. Although curious about who it was that was going to add the number to over 30, she didn't ask. Anyway, she would see the people the following day. After hearing the conversation between Jack and Celine, not only Jonathan, but the three ladies were curious about what kind of helicopter Jack had that could actually accommodate more than 30 people. One had to know that a helicopter had a maximum capacity that it could efficiently handle. Once the maximum capacity was exceeded, it would affect the performance of the helicopter. They were going to Kartu City, so it meant that it would take them a long time to arrive there. They wouldn't want to be slowed down due to something like the number of passengers on the helicopter was exceeding the maximum that the helicopter could handle. The four of them got out of the mansion, completely forgetting about the interesting thing that they were talking about. They wanted to see what kind of helicopter it was. After about 20 minutes, the group came back to the mansion. Jonathan looked at Jack as he asked in disbelief, Jack, where on earth did you get that helicopter from? I bought it, of course. Or, is there somewhere that they give them out for free so that I can go and collect more? Jack shrugged as he responded. Be serious. That kind of helicopter is mainly used by the big institutions like Red Cross or the bigger hospitals. Maybe some big security companies have them as well. But for you to have one as well, this is surprising. Jonathan said as he sat next to Jack. I bought it, all right? Jack couldn't tell them that he actually received the helicopter from the system. What's more, he wondered how Jonathan would react when he knew that Jack actually had 3 of the helicopters. Is the helicopter that special? Angie asked. She wasn't the only one, as even the other girls were curious about the helicopter. After all, they knew that Jonathan's background wasn't small. For the helicopter to make him to react in such a manner, there had to be something special about it. You guys may not know this. The helicopter out there is special. It's called Mi-26M. It's a helicopter mainly used by the big security organizations. Even the army will use this kind of helicopter. It has a large carrying capacity and can carry a lot of weight. What's even more, the helicopter out there is one of the ones that is modified for the security companies. It can deploy up to 80 troops. As for the price, it's worth over $10 million. The number of this helicopter that have been produced in the world amount to less than 500. Even my family only has one, Jonathan explained. When the girls heard the description of the helicopter, they were greatly surprised. They couldn't help but look at Jack again. They didn't know how many secrets Jack was hiding. He could afford such a helicopter. Not only was the price high, considering that the number of the helicopter itself was limited, for Jack to be able to acquire one, this explained that he was hiding too deep. The Jezda family had only one of them. On the other hand, Jack also had one of them. Didn't that mean that he might as well be of the same level as the Jezda family in terms of influence? Jack, just what are you hiding? Jonathan asked. Nothing much. It's just that the helicopter out there was bought just recently. As for where I got it, You shouldn't worry about that. You may be surprised in the future that I actually have 3 of them, Jack stated with a smile. As if I will believe it. To get one of them is already a miracle. How can you get 3 of them? Jonathan couldn't believe it. That's up to you. Jack didn't explain further. The following morning, a group of 20 people arrived at the Prince and Princess Palace. The guards at the gate already knew them, as this wasn't the first day that these people had come here. Furthermore, they were driving the Bentegas that Jack had bought. The 4 cars drove into the compound. Not long after, 3 cars arrived at the gate. Bob was surprised. But when they introduced themselves, he allowed the group in. Jack had already informed him that there would be 2 groups of people that would be coming on this day. I wonder what all these guys are here for. Are they going to go out for a mission or something? Bob wondered. He had seen the helicopter and he could tell that it was like the one that he had seen in a movie a period back. That was a helicopter that was used by soldiers or security department. Although there were other modifications that could be used by the health sector and so on, he could recognize the one that had landed in the palace grounds. In any case, he wasn't going to be so nosy on what was going to happen. He simply went back to his post after making sure that there was nobody else that was left out. Jack and the gang had already been prepared. They were simply waiting for the 35 to arrive. When they came, the group took breakfast before they set off. Just like Jonathan and the others, the group of 35 was surprised when they saw such a big helicopter. Those that knew about it couldn't help but wonder what kind of background Jack had. In any case, Gabriel and one of Jonathan's men were going to be the pilots for the day. With the size of the helicopter, it was obvious that a single pilot would have a difficult time in handling it. The journey was going to be long, so they had decided to leave by 8 in the morning. They had already made sure to take with them the things that they would need on the way. Food and water were some of the basics. Since they were no longer going to take a detour to Venture City and directly go to Kartu City, it would take them about 5 hours to arrive in the central province's Kartu City. The helicopter could fly at a speed of 295 kilometers per hour. Considering that it wasn't like a car where it would be held in a traffic jam or it would have to slow down when climbing the mountains, this speed was fast enough in air. When they arrived in Kartu City, Jack and Jonathan had to look for a place to stay. Although the girls wanted to invite them to their house, Jack and Jonathan thought that it wasn't appropriate for them to go there. After all, if they did go, they would have to face the girls' parents. In the end, it would be like an introduction. Who was ready for that at the moment? None. As the girls went back to their parents' house, Jack and Jonathan decided to stay in the Cardinal's Supreme Hotel. This place Jack had already booked for a month. So, there was no need for him to book another place. As for the 35, they were going to book their own rooms. Of course, Jack was the one that was going to pay for the expenses. After staying there for the night, Jack took the Lamborghini Urus that Denali had left in the hotel parking space, before driving it to the Brightway Medical Research Center. Jonathan decided to go with him. They were currently in the central province. Here, it was easy for his second uncle to know his whereabouts, and just as he knew, he would definitely send more assassins his way. If they did send someone like Spider when he was still weakened, it would only lead to his death. Jack could defeat Spider without getting injured. That implied that he was strong. So, Jack was his only source of protection as long as he wasn't back to the family manor. He had also followed Jack because he was curious about what type of pill he was producing. He knew about the Brightway Medical Research Center. As for how Jack came to be the owner of the research center, that was something that he didn't know about. When they got there, he found that there was a group that was waiting for him. It seemed that Denali had informed them that Jack was coming to see where the problem was with the pill. The group welcomed him, though they were surprised that there were actually twins. In the end, Jack didn't think that it was necessary to explain anything to them and simply asked them to take him to the trial room. The trial room was located in the biggest building that had 5 floors. It was on the topmost floor, the 5th. When Jack got there, he found that there were several trial subjects there. He knew that this was normal. The research center didn't simply research about human medicine. There were other departments that dealt with other types of medicine. Just like how the test was done, they used a normal white mouse. The pill was pure white in color. Since it was true that the mouse wouldn't simply take the pill, they had to use water to make a solution that would then be fed to the mouse. The test went on. Jack and Jonathan observed from the side. Jonathan asked, "What kind of pill is that? It's so small and has no scent at all." "It's a body-strengthening pill." Jack replied. What kind of pill is that? I have never heard of a disease that requires such a pill." Jonathan asked again. The weak can be treated by the use of this pill, Jack replied. Jonathan wanted to ask more when the results of the test came out. As you can see, the results of the pill show that the pill has no effect on the mouse. The scientist in charge of the production handed the document to Jack. Jack could see that they had tested the physique of the mouse in terms of strength, speed and so on before giving it the pill. In the end, after 3 hours, they found that there was actually no change at all. The results were still the same. Jack frowned. He wondered what was happening here. Angel, could there be something wrong with the recipe? How can there be anything wrong with the recipe that the system gives? That's completely impossible. Then what happened to the pills? The results show that they have no effect, Jack asked. Can't you see the mistake that you guys are making? The body strengthening pill is meant for humans. Yet here you are, testing it on a mouse and you are expecting results? But the mouse has always been used as a test subject for drugs that are used by humans, Jack said. Whatever you say. The body strengthening pill is meant for humans. No matter how similar the cells or physique of the mouse are closer to that of a human, it's still a mouse at the end of the day. So, there will be no effect. Another thing to note is that you only retrieved the recipe and not the prescription of using the pills. Although it was said that a person could only take 2 pills, do you know whether the 2 are taken at the same time or at what time difference after taking the first one? Then, although it's a pill, did you ask for the method of using it? Not really. You simply took the pill, dissolved it in water and fed it to the mouse. Even if the pill could really work on the mouse, the results would still remain the same. He had completely forgotten something like that. Although it was true that the scientists were the ones that produced the pill according to the recipe that he was given, they had not really researched the pill at all. So, they didn't know about the effect of the pill when taken. They simply knew that the pill was supposed to increase the strength of a person. Jack took a deep breath as he tried thinking about what the system had just said. He looked at the scientist in front of him. His name was Walter. He was from a big research institute and was poached by Denali. Have you tried different methods of administering the pill to the mouse? Jack asked. Yes. We forced the solid pill into the mouth of the mouse. Since the pill could easily dissolve, it wasn't a problem for the mouse to take it. But the results were the same as now, Walter said. We tried dissolving the pill with different amounts of water. In the end, there were no changes at all. We used warm water, cold water. Nothing worked even when we used hot water to dissolve the pill first, Walter continued. Jack could see just how frustrated Walter was. He was someone who likes researching. So, although he wasn't the one that had researched the pill, it was true that he was involved in the production. So, for him to see that his efforts actually bore no results, it made him so depressed. System. Where's the prescription? Jack asked. Do you want it here or back in the hotel? Jack thought for a while and decided that he was going to take the prescription back at the hotel. With that decision made, Jack looked at Walter and said, just continue with the production of the second batch of pills. Don't worry about the effects of the pill, I will take care of it. Although Walter was confused, he still agreed and went back to discuss with his fellow scientists about what Jack had just said. Jonathan followed Jack back to the hotel without asking a question. He was curious. But, seeing that the pill seemed to be ineffective, he decided not to ask. After all, what was the use of something that couldn't be used? Jack entered his room in the suite. Then, he asked the system for the prescription. Dr. Angel's body-strengthening pill intake prescription has been placed in the bedside cabinet. Doctor? Since when did you become a doctor? Jack was rendered speechless. Of course I'm a doctor. Otherwise, how could I know the body-strengthening pill recipe as well as the prescription? Didn't the scientists that you hired failed after days of tests? Jack simply shook his head and opened the cabinet before taking a piece of paper. Just like the recipe, the prescription was also written on the paper.